Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. There are some accidents that leave no room for doubt, and then there are those that leave nothing but doubt. Tonight we unseal a suppressed record from the municipal archives, a case officially labeled accidental, yet the details within suggest a narrative that was deliberately buried. This is the hidden file on the disappearance of Elias Thorne. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some files are sealed for a reason, but every seal can be broken. Welcome back to the Obsidian Archive. Tonight we unseal the file on Elias Vance, a 42-year-old geologist whose final drive into the unforgiving heart of the Ironwood National Forest ended not with a conclusion, but with a question mark so large it has shadowed this remote community for over a decade. The official record calls it a tragic accident, but the deeper you dig, the more the official story crumbles, revealing a foundation of unsettling inconsistencies and whispers of something far more sinister. October 19th, 2013. The day began like any other for Elias. Meticulous, organized, and a creature of habit, he was known for his almost obsessive preparation. A seasoned geologist with a specialty in rare mineral formations, he was no stranger to the wilderness. To him, the treacherous mountain passes and dense, ancient forests were not obstacles. They were his office. He was planning a 3-day survey trip to a remote sector of the park, an area known for its geological quirks and its utter lack of cell service. His wife, Sarah, later told investigators that his mood was normal, perhaps even a little excited. He was on the cusp of a discovery, he told her, something that could change the map. He packed his gear with practiced efficiency, surveying tools, emergency rations, a satellite phone he rarely used but always carried, and his detailed field journals. He kissed his wife goodbye at 6 a.m., the sky still a bruised purple, and started the engine of his trusted Land Rover, a vehicle he maintained with the same precision he applied to his research. The last image Sarah had of her husband was his taillights disappearing into the pre-dawn gloom. His route was straightforward, a 3-hour drive on paved highways before turning onto the winding, gravel-scarred Fire Road 7 that led deep into the park's core. His first and only stop was at a dusty, isolated gas station an hour into his journey. The attendant, a man named Hank, remembered him clearly. He said Elias bought a full tank of gas, 2 black coffees, and a local newspaper. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Elias was calm, focused. He mentioned the weather, a storm system that was predicted to roll in later that evening, but he seemed unconcerned, stating he'd be at his base camp long before it hit. But here, we find our first anomaly, a detail that went unnoticed in the initial report. Hank also recalled Elias asking a strange question. He asked if there were any other access roads to the northern ridge, unofficial ones, not on any park map. Hank told him there weren't, that Fire Road 7 was the only way in or out. Elias simply nodded, paid in cash, and left. Why was a man who knew this terrain better than anyone asking about non-existent roads? Was he expecting to be followed? Or was he looking for an alternate way out? The drive from that gas station is where the timeline begins to blur. For the next 2 hours, Elias Vance was effectively a ghost. No cameras, no witnesses, just a man in a Land Rover driving deeper into a wilderness that was about to be consumed by a storm. The landscape there is brutal and isolating, towering pines form a dense canopy that chokes the light. The road narrows, and the silence is broken only by the crunch of gravel under tires. It's a place where the modern world feels like a distant memory. The official narrative states that somewhere along this lonely stretch of road, as the sky darkened and the first drops of rain began to fall, Elias Vance lost control of his vehicle. A simple miscalculation, a moment of distraction on a treacherous turn, leading to a fatal plunge. But Elias wasn't a careless man. He was a survivor, a planner. And the evidence later discovered at the scene of this so-called accident suggests that his final drive was anything but simple. When a person vanishes, the first clues are often found in the things they leave behind. In the case of Elias Vance, what was left behind wasn't a clue, it was a contradiction. 2 days after Elias was due to return, with no word on his satellite phone, his wife reported him missing. A park ranger, conducting a preliminary search along Elias's planned route, made the discovery that would define the entire investigation. It was Elias's Land Rover, but it hadn't plunged into a ravine, as one might expect from a fatal accident. It was parked almost deliberately on the very edge of a sheer 500-foot drop known locally as Widow's Peak. The front passenger side tire was less than 6 inches from the abyss. The vehicle was perfectly angled along the cliff's edge, a position so precarious that investigators later commented it would have taken incredible skill or incredible luck to park it there without going over. The scene was eerily sterile. The storm had passed, leaving the air cold and clean. There were no skid marks on the gravel leading up to the vehicle, indicating it hadn't swerved or lost control. It had been driven there slowly, intentionally. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition, but the engine was cold, the battery dead. Inside, the scene became even more perplexing. On the passenger seat sat a half-eaten sandwich and a thermos of coffee, now cold. Elias's expensive surveying equipment was neatly stored in the back. His heavy-duty hiking pack, filled with survival gear, was there. His wallet, however, containing his ID, credit cards, and over $200 in cash, was gone. His satellite phone and his personal cell phone were also missing. A man who meticulously prepared for every contingency had seemingly walked away from his vehicle on the edge of a cliff in the middle of a storm, taking only his wallet and phones, leaving behind the very tools he would need to survive. Investigators from the county sheriff's department were the first to process the scene. Their initial assessment, logged in the official case file, which we obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, is telling. The lead deputy noted, and I quote from the heavily redacted document, "The positioning of the vehicle does not appear consistent with a standard motor vehicle accident. The scene suggests the vehicle was stopped deliberately. Subject may have exited the vehicle and fallen from the cliff edge." This was the birth of the official narrative. Elias Vance, for reasons unknown, stopped his car and either accidentally fell or intentionally jumped. But the forensics, or lack thereof, told a different story. A thorough search of the cliff edge revealed no signs of a slip, no disturbed soil, no broken branches. Nothing to indicate a person had gone over the edge. Furthermore, Elias's field journals were found scattered on the floor of the Land Rover. He was famously protective of these journals. They were the heart of his life's work. Yet here they were, pages exposed, one of them torn out. The remaining pages contained complex geological data, but the last few entries were different. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. He wrote of anomalous magnetic readings and a sub-harmonic resonance he couldn't identify. The final, chilling entry, written in shaky block letters, read, "It's not a cave. They don't want it found. They hear me." Who were they? And what did he find that wasn't a cave? The official report makes no mention of this entry. It was dismissed as the rambling of a man suffering from stress or a sudden medical episode. But to those who knew Elias, it was a terrifying glimpse into his final hours. A clue that pointed not to an accident, but to a confrontation. With the discovery of the vehicle, what began as a missing person case escalated into one of the largest search and rescue operations in the state's history. The objective was clear: find Elias Vance. The assumption, based on the car's location, was that he was likely injured or worse at the bottom of the ravine below Widow's Peak. For 10 days, a small army of professionals and volunteers descended upon the Ironwood National Forest. The operation was a multi-agency effort, a testament to the gravity of the situation. Seasoned mountain rescue teams, canine units with scent-tracking dogs, helicopter crews with thermal imaging cameras, and hundreds of volunteers combed through the unforgiving terrain. The search area was immense, a sprawling grid of dense forest, treacherous slopes, and deep, shadowy canyons. The lead search coordinator, a man named Marcus Thorne, a veteran of dozens of such operations, described it as searching for a needle in a stack of needles. The initial focus was the 500-foot ravine directly below the Land Rover. Elite rappelling teams spent 2 full days meticulously scouring the cliff face and the forest floor below. They found nothing. No body. No scraps of clothing. No sign that anyone had ever fallen there. This was the first major blow to the accident or suicide theory. A fall from that height would have left undeniable evidence. Frustrated, the search perimeter was expanded. Teams on the ground formed grid lines, hacking their way through thick underbrush, their calls echoing in the dense woods. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their thermal cameras scanning for any trace of body heat. But the thick forest canopy rendered them largely ineffective. It was the canine units that provided the most baffling clue of the entire search. Multiple scent dogs were brought to the Land Rover. Each one picked up Elias's scent from the driver's seat and tracked it, not towards the cliff edge, but in the opposite direction, heading north along the gravel fire road for approximately 200 yards. And then, at the exact same spot, every single dog stopped. They became agitated, circled, and could not reacquire the scent. It was as if Elias Vance had simply ceased to exist at that spot. Thorne, in a later interview, stated, "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen scents fade, I've seen them get washed out by rain. I've never seen 4 different dogs lose a fresh scent so abruptly, so completely, in the same spot. It was like he was picked up by a helicopter, but there were no reports of unauthorized aircraft, and the ground was too soft to not show tracks if another vehicle had been there." As the days wore on, a palpable sense of unease settled over the search teams. The forest itself seemed to work against them. Equipment malfunctioned at an unusual rate, compasses spinning, GPS units losing signal in clear weather. Several volunteers reported feeling an intense, oppressive sensation of being watched, while others spoke of hearing faint, metallic sounds that seemed to come from beneath the ground, sounds they dismissed as fatigue playing tricks on their minds. The search was officially called off after 10 days. The official reason was the lack of any new leads and the increasing danger to the search parties as the weather worsened. Over 1,500 acres had been searched with no result. Elias Vance had vanished from the face of the earth. For his family, the lack of answers was a unique form of torture. For the investigators, it was a deeply frustrating dead end. But for those who looked at the facts, the strangely parked car, the missing personal effects, the frantic journal entry, and the scent trail that led to nowhere, it was the beginning of a dark and complex mystery. The forest had not claimed Elias Vance by accident. It was hiding a secret, and he had stumbled right into it. In the absence of a body, a case can remain a missing person investigation indefinitely. But 2 years after Elias Vance's Land Rover was found on the edge of Widow's Peak, the county, under pressure from the insurance company and a desire for closure, made a ruling. Elias Vance was declared legally dead. His cause of death was officially listed as misadventure, and the case was closed. The final report, a document of just 12 pages, paints a simple and convenient picture. It suggests that Elias, possibly disoriented by the oncoming storm or suffering from an undiagnosed medical event, parked his car in a moment of confusion. He then exited the vehicle, wandered into the dense forest, and succumbed to the elements. His body, the report concludes, was likely taken by wildlife and will probably never be found. It's a neat, tidy explanation that closes the book on a difficult and expensive case. It is also an explanation that deliberately ignores nearly every piece of contradictory evidence. Let us deconstruct this official narrative. The theory of disorientation, or a medical event, is undermined by the precise, almost surgical parking of the vehicle. It was not the act of a confused or incapacitated man. The theory that he wandered into the woods is contradicted by the fact that he left behind all of his survival gear, the gear of an expert outdoorsman who knew better than to enter that wilderness unprepared. The report makes no attempt to explain why he would have taken his wallet and phones, items of little use in a survival situation, while leaving behind his pack and equipment. What use is a credit card in the middle of a national forest? The most significant omission, however, is the complete disregard for the final entry in his journal. The mention of anomalous magnetic readings, the phrase, "It's not a cave," and the terrifying assertion that "they hear me" are not addressed. These crucial clues into his state of mind are completely absent from the final summary. They complicate the simple narrative of a tragic accident. So they were simply filed away, buried in the appendices of the case file. The scent trail that vanished into thin air is dismissed in a single sentence as inconclusive due to environmental factors. It fails to mention that 4 separate, highly trained canine units all lost the trail at the exact same location. This isn't an environmental factor. It's a statistical anomaly that points towards a highly unconventional departure from the scene. So, if the official narrative is a fiction designed for convenience, what is the truth? We are left with only theories, each more unsettling than the last. One theory suggests foul play, that Elias was met on that lonely road by someone he either knew or was forced to stop for. The missing wallet and phones could suggest a robbery. But why would robbers leave behind a valuable vehicle and thousands of dollars worth of geological equipment? Another theory, one favored by his wife Sarah, is that Elias staged his own disappearance, that his cryptic comment about changing the map was a clue, and he used his wilderness skills to vanish and start a new life. But again, why? He was by all accounts a happy man with a stable life and a passion for his work. The third and most disturbing theory circles back to that final journal entry. That Elias, in his geological surveys, stumbled upon something he was not meant to find. Not a mineral deposit, but something else. An undeclared government installation, a secret mining operation, or something even stranger. His discovery made him a threat, and they, whoever they are, intervened, removing him and his research from the equation. This would explain the missing items, the disappearing scent trail, and the sterile, staged nature of the scene. It's a narrative that sounds like fiction, but in a case with no answers, it fits the facts better than the official story. The file on Elias Vance is officially closed, stamped with the word accident. But it is a lie. This was not a case of a man who lost his way in the woods. This was a case of a man who found something, and in doing so, was lost to the world. The truth remains sealed, locked away somewhere in the dark, silent heart of the Ironwood Forest. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some files are sealed for a reason, not to protect the innocent, but to bury the truth. Narrator. 2 weeks after Elias Vance, a respected geologist, vanished into the desolate expanse of the Calico Peaks, his truck was finally located. It was parked, not crashed, along a rarely used service road known only to miners and forestry workers. The official report, filed under case number 77B4, is clinical, almost dismissive. It paints a picture of a man who simply walked away from his vehicle and succumbed to the elements. An unfortunate but unremarkable accident. But when you peel back the sterile language of law enforcement, the scene itself tells a different story. It screams of inconsistency. The first anomaly: the keys were in the ignition, the battery dead. The dome light was switched on, suggesting a door had been left ajar for days, slowly draining the truck's lifeblood. Why would an experienced outdoorsman like Vance make such a rookie mistake? He wasn't a tourist. He knew this land. Inside the cab, his geological hammer, his collection samples, and his high-frequency satellite phone, his lifeline in this remote territory, were all sitting on the passenger seat, untouched. A man facing an emergency, a man lost and disoriented, would take his tools, and he would most certainly take his only means of communication. Yet, they remained. Outside, the scene grew even more perplexing. The ground around the truck was a mixture of hard-packed dirt and loose shale. The initial search team noted only one set of footprints leading away from the driver's side door. Vance's, identified by the unique tread of his hiking boots. These tracks led for approximately 50 yards into the dense, thorny scrub before they simply stopped. Not scuffed, not disturbed, not indicating a fall or a struggle. They just ceased to exist on the hard, unforgiving ground, as if the man who made them was plucked from the earth. There were no drag marks, no signs of an animal attack, no footprints from another person, just the abrupt end to a journey. And then there was the object found placed carefully on the hood of the truck. A single, perfectly preserved raven's feather, weighed down by a small, smooth river stone. It wasn't there by chance. The placement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. It's not mentioned in the final police summary, but it is noted in the initial field report by the responding officer, a detail that was later deemed irrelevant to the investigation. An irrelevant detail, or an inconvenient one. The scene wasn't one of panic or accident. It felt staged. It was quiet, deliberate, and profoundly strange. This was not a place where a man got lost. This was a place where a man was erased. Narrator. In cases of disappearance where a body is never recovered, a presumption of death certificate is eventually issued. It's a legal formality, a piece of paper designed to bring closure. For Elias Vance, this document was anything but. The official cause of death was listed as misadventure, a term as vague as it is final. But buried deep within the county archives is the preliminary report from the acting coroner, Dr. Alistair Finch, a man who would retire under mysterious circumstances just months later. This document, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, is a masterclass in bureaucratic ambiguity. Large sections, particularly those dealing with environmental factors and toxicology screenings of soil samples from the scene, are blacked out with thick, impenetrable redactions. What could possibly be classified in a simple soil sample? Dr. Finch's own handwritten notes in the margins, however, escaped the censor's pen. In one section, he questions the absence of expected scavenger activity in the area where Vance's tracks ended. In another, he writes, unusual magnetic resonance readings from subjects' personal effects. Magnetic resonance? On a satellite phone and a geological hammer? It's a note that has baffled independent investigators for years. Most damning, however, is the final addendum. Finch states, while the evidence points towards exposure as the likely contributing factor, I cannot, with professional certainty, rule out external, unconventional intervention. The circumstances surrounding the subject's departure from the vehicle are inconsistent with established patterns of disorientation or voluntary abandonment. Unconventional intervention. It's a phrase that hangs in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It is not the language of a coroner ruling on an accident. It is the language of a man who saw something he could not explain, something that did not fit within the neat boxes of his profession. He recommended the case remain open pending further environmental analysis. That recommendation was ignored. The misadventure ruling was pushed through by the county sheriff within 48 hours, effectively closing the book on Elias Vance. Dr. Finch's report was classified, sealed, and forgotten. It became another casualty of the official narrative, a dissenting voice silenced by the stroke of a pen. The report doesn't provide answers, but it confirms one crucial thing. The authorities knew the scene at the Calico Peaks was not what it seemed, and for reasons we can only speculate, they chose to look the other way. Narrator. 10 miles from where Elias Vance's truck was found lies the skeletal remains of a town called Silver Creek. It's not on most maps. A handful of houses, a boarded-up general store, and a population you could count on two hands. These are people who live on the edge of the world by choice, distrustful of outsiders and authorities in equal measure. When the official investigation into Vance's disappearance concluded, no one bothered to ask them what they saw. They are the keepers of the region's memory, of stories that predate the service roads and the geological surveys. To them, the Calico Peaks are not just mountains. They are a place with a history, a personality, a place to be respected and feared. We spoke with a man named Silas, a prospector whose family has lived in Silver Creek for 4 generations. He refused to be filmed, but his voice, recorded on a pocket cassette, was like gravel and whiskey. He spoke of the lights. For decades, locals have reported strange, silent, multicolored lights that hover over the peaks, moving in ways that defy physics. They are not planes, not helicopters. Silas claimed he saw them the night Vance went missing. A low hum, he said, like a million hornets in a jar, and the air gets cold, real cold. He wasn't the only one. An elderly woman, Maria, spoke of the whispering, a phenomenon where the wind in the canyons seems to carry disjointed voices and fragments of conversations. She claimed that on that same night, the whispering was louder than it had ever been. These accounts are, of course, anecdotal. They are folklore, easily dismissed by law enforcement as the ramblings of isolated eccentrics. But is it a coincidence that these local legends center on the exact area of the disappearance? Elias Vance wasn't just any geologist. His field notes reveal he was studying anomalous electromagnetic fluctuations in the Calico Peaks. He was there because he, a man of science, was investigating the very phenomena the people of Silver Creek had mythologized for a century. He wasn't just a man who got lost on a mountain. He was a man who was actively searching for something hidden within it. The locals believe the mountain protects its secrets. They say Vance got too close, that he knocked on a door that was never meant to be opened, and that something answered. In the forgotten town of Silver Creek, the disappearance of Elias Vance wasn't an accident. It was an inevitability. Narrator. For the world, the case of Elias Vance is a closed file, a fading entry in a county ledger. But for his family, it is a wound that never heals, a constant, gnawing injustice. His wife, Lena, and his son, Marcus, never accepted the official ruling of misadventure. For them, the word is an insult to the memory of a meticulous, brilliant, and careful man. "My father was not a careless person," Marcus told us, his voice strained. He planned every expedition down to the last detail: food, water, routes, backup routes. The idea that he would just wander off into the wilderness without his phone, without his gear, it's absurd. It's a lie. For 2 decades, the Vance family has fought a lonely war against bureaucratic indifference. They spent their life savings hiring private investigators. The first one quit after 2 weeks, claiming the area was unsettling and that he felt he was being watched. The second managed to uncover something crucial: air traffic control logs from a nearby military base for the night of the disappearance were missing. Not redacted, but completely gone, as if the entire 24-hour period never happened. The family filed petitions to have the case reopened, presenting the coroner's private notes and the investigators' findings. Each time, they were denied. They were met with a wall of silence, their letters unanswered, their calls unreturned. In their small suburban home, an entire room is dedicated to Elias. Maps cover the walls, marked with pushpins and string. Boxes of files, witness transcripts, and photographs are stacked in neat, hopeful piles. It is an archive of a man's life and a museum of his mysterious end. They don't necessarily believe in the whispers from Silver Creek or the otherworldly lights, but they believe in a cover-up. They believe the anomalies at the scene, the coroner's doubts, and the missing military records all point to one conclusion. Someone knows what happened to Elias Vance, and that someone has gone to great lengths to ensure the truth remains buried in the Calico Peaks. Their fight is no longer just about finding Elias. It's about reclaiming his story from the fiction the authorities wrote for him. It's a search not for a body, but for a single, elusive commodity: the truth. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some files are meant to stay closed, not because they are empty, but because they are full. When the official investigation into the disappearance of Julian Croft concluded with the word accident, the case file was stamped, sealed, and relegated to a dusty shelf in a county archive. For the authorities, it was a tidy resolution to a perplexing situation, a tragic, yet unremarkable, mishap. But for Julian's family, the word was a brand, a searing dismissal of their intuition. They knew Julian, meticulous, cautious, a man who planned every detail. An accident felt like a fiction, a convenient label for a truth too difficult to uncover. So, they did what any family with means and lingering questions would do. They hired someone to keep digging. His name was Arthur Finch, a private investigator with a reputation for unearthing secrets people paid good money to keep buried. Finch wasn't a flashy operative. He was a man of ledgers, receipts, and worn-out shoe leather. And it is his ledger, obtained from his estate years after his own quiet passing, that reopens this case. The leather-bound book is filled with his precise, cursive script. Early entries detail standard procedure: interviewing friends, retracing Julian's last known steps, reviewing the police report. But as the weeks turn into months, a distinct shift occurs in the tone. The objective investigator is replaced by a haunted chronicler. An entry from October 12th reads, "Spoke with JC's business partner again. Story hasn't changed, but his eyes have. He knows I'm looking. He smells of fear and expensive cologne." Another, a month later. The official report is a masterpiece of omission. The timeline has a 4-hour gap they attribute to leisurely travel. 4 hours is an eternity. 4 hours is long enough to make a man disappear. Finch documented a growing sense of being watched. He noted unfamiliar cars parked on his street, strange clicks on his phone line. He believed the official narrative wasn't just incomplete. It was a deliberately constructed wall. His notes detail his attempts to access Julian Croft's financial records, attempts that were stonewalled at every turn by bureaucratic red tape that felt unusually thick. He wrote, "They are protecting something, but is it a person or a secret? The deeper I dig into Croft's life, the more it seems the accident wasn't what happened to him, but what he was running from." Finch's ledger doesn't solve the case. It contains no smoking gun. Instead, it serves as a testament to a truth suffocated by official consensus. It's a map of dead ends, a collection of unanswered questions, and a portrait of an investigator who came to believe he wasn't just searching for a missing person, but was staring into a carefully managed conspiracy. The final entry is chillingly simple. "They know I have this. I'm stopping, for my own safety. May God forgive me." Arthur Finch walked away from the case, but his ledger remained, a silent accusation waiting for someone to read between the lines. Following the trail left in Arthur Finch's ledger, our own investigation led us to a predictable yet formidable obstacle: the official case file. After months of formal requests and legal wrangling, a package arrived from the state archives. Inside, a stack of documents, photocopied and bound, representing the complete official record of Julian Croft's disappearance. But complete is a misleading term. As we turned the pages, a chilling pattern emerged. Black ink, thick, impenetrable bars of redaction obscuring names, dates, locations, and entire paragraphs. This wasn't the neat, selective redaction you see to protect a minor's identity. This was a systematic gutting of the file. Page after page looked more like abstract art than an investigative report. The initial witness statements were heavily censored. A report from the first officer on the scene where Croft's car was found abandoned had entire sections blacked out. What could possibly need to be hidden in a description of an empty vehicle? The toxicology report was present, but the summary page, where a medical examiner would provide context and conclusion, was almost entirely redacted. Only the words "no foul play suspected" remained, floating in a sea of black. It's an Orwellian tactic. The conclusion is provided, but the evidence that led to it is deemed classified. We cross-referenced the redacted pages with the timeline of events. The censorship was most aggressive around the 4-hour gap that so troubled Arthur Finch. Reports from that specific time window were rendered useless. Who did Julian meet? Where did he go? The answers are undoubtedly under those black bars. The question is not what is being hidden, but why. In a simple accidental death case, redactions are minimal. But in Croft's file, the level of censorship suggests state-level secrets, not a personal tragedy. We consulted with a legal analyst who specializes in Freedom of Information Act requests. Her assessment was stark. This level of redaction on a decades-old cold case is extraordinary. This isn't about protecting privacy. This is active information control. Whatever is in this file, someone in a position of power still wants it buried, and buried deep. The black ink is more than just censorship. It's a statement. It's a clear signal that to dig any further is to trespass. It transforms a simple cold case into something far more sinister. The redacted pages don't hide the truth. They scream that there's a truth to hide. They are a monument to a cover-up, a paper tombstone for facts deemed too dangerous to see the light of day. For every line of text we can read, there are 10 we cannot, each one a ghost of a fact, a specter of a clue, forever lost in the bureaucratic void. For decades, the official story of Julian Croft's disappearance relied on a handful of statements, all neatly supporting the accident narrative. But what if the most important voice was never heard? What if a key witness was interviewed, but their testimony was deemed irrelevant, or worse, inconvenient? Tucked away in the unredacted appendix of the case file, we found a name: Elias Vance. Her interview was a single-page summary, dismissed by the lead detective as the ramblings of an elderly woman, likely confused. She was a birdwatcher who frequented the woods near where Croft's car was found. For years, she remained silent, convinced no one would believe her. We found her in a quiet retirement home, her memory still sharp as a tack. Her story, which she had told the police only once, painted a picture that was anything but an accident. They didn't want to listen, she told us, her voice frail but firm. I told the young officer exactly what I saw. It wasn't one car that day. There were two. According to Eleanor, on the afternoon Julian Croft disappeared, she was in her usual bird-watching spot when she saw Croft's sedan pull over. But a few minutes later, a second vehicle, a dark, nondescript sedan, pulled up behind it. 2 men got out, she recounted. They weren't in uniform. They were in suits, looked like government men. They weren't frantic. They were calm, professional. One of them spoke to Mr. Croft, who got out of his car. It wasn't an argument. It was a discussion, but it felt heavy. Eleanor was too far away to hear the words, but she saw the exchange. She saw Julian Croft, looking stressed but compliant, get into the back of the second car. The two men got in the front, and the car drove away, leaving Croft's vehicle abandoned on the side of the road. "I reported it," she insisted. "I gave them the time, the description of the car, the men." The officer wrote it down, but he had this look on his face, like he knew he was going to throw the notes away as soon as he left. Her testimony was explosive. It single-handedly dismantled the official timeline and the accident theory. It suggests an abduction, not a mishap. A planned, coordinated event executed with cold precision. Why was her statement buried? Why was she discredited? It points to a deliberate effort to control the narrative from the very beginning. Her account validates Arthur Finch's suspicions of a cover-up and gives context to the heavily redacted files. The information being protected wasn't about a tragic accident. It was about a clandestine operation that took place in broad daylight. Eleanor Vance was not a confused old woman. She was an inconvenient witness to a truth that others were desperate to bury, along with Julian Croft. A man in a suit doesn't just vanish in an accident. A witness statement isn't buried without reason, and case files are not redacted to this degree to cover up a simple tragedy. The testimony of Eleanor Vance provided the what, but it was Julian Croft's own life that held the why. Following the trail of breadcrumbs left by the paranoid private investigator Arthur Finch, we delved into the one area the official investigation seemed to conveniently ignore: Julian Croft's finances. On the surface, Croft was a successful, if unremarkable, import-export consultant. His declared income was comfortable, his taxes were in order. But Finch's ledger mentioned a shadow ledger, a second set of books he was convinced existed. We enlisted a forensic accountant to reconstruct Croft's financial life, digging through archived public records, corporate filings, and international trade logs. What she uncovered was a labyrinth. Croft's legitimate business was a front, a clean facade for a much murkier operation. He was a financial intermediary, a ghost in the machine for powerful anonymous clients. We found a network of shell corporations, registered in offshore havens, moving vast sums of money between continents. These weren't standard business transactions. The money flowed from defense contractors to political action committees, from foreign holding companies to individuals with known ties to intelligence agencies. Julian Croft wasn't just an importer. He was a launderer, a high-stakes courier in a global game of shadow finance. He was the man who made difficult transactions disappear. The financial labyrinth provided the motive that had been missing all along. An accident is random, but Croft's disappearance was anything but. In this world of clandestine money and state-level secrets, a man who knows too much is a liability. Did he decide to get out? Was he planning to talk? Was he compromised by a rival agency? We may never know the specific trigger, but the conclusion is inescapable. Julian Croft wasn't the victim of a random tragic accident. He was a loose end. The men in the dark sedan weren't kidnappers in a conventional sense. They were removers. They were there to sanitize a problem, to ensure the labyrinth of transactions he managed remained secure, and its secrets kept. The abandoned car, the accident ruling, the redacted files. It was all part of the cleanup. It was the closing of a ledger, a final untraceable transaction in a life built on them. Julian Croft's disappearance wasn't a mystery to be solved by local police. It was a state-sanctioned redaction of a human life. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some accidents are just convenient ways to close a file. The official narrative painted Julian Hayes as the quintessential suburban family man, an accountant for a mid-level firm, a devoted husband, a father of two who coached Little League on Saturdays. His 2004 disappearance was a tragedy that rocked his quiet community. The police report, stamped and filed, tells a simple, sad story. A man driving home, late on a rain-slicked mountain pass, a moment of lost control, and a car that wouldn't be found for 3 days at the bottom of Black Creek Ravine. An accident. Case closed. But the truth, archived in the shadows, is never that simple. The Julian Hayes his family knew was only one half of the man. The other half operated in a world of coded ledgers, burner phones, and clandestine meetings in sterile downtown hotel rooms. He wasn't just balancing the books for a regional construction company. He was laundering money for entities that don't file tax returns. Our investigation, pulling on threads left untouched for nearly 2 decades, uncovered a hidden storage unit, rented under a false name, paid for in cash, 12 months in advance, just 2 weeks before his car went over the edge. Inside, investigators found not personal effects, but a ghost's toolkit. Several passports with Julian's picture, but different names. Stacks of foreign and domestic currency bound in rubber bands, and a laptop. The laptop was the key. Its hard drive was triple encrypted, a fortress of data that took a team of forensic experts months to crack. What they found inside rewrote the entire story of Julian Hayes. It wasn't just a second set of books. It was a detailed record of illicit transactions, a roadmap of a criminal enterprise funneling money for organized crime syndicates. He was their financial architect, the man who made dirty money clean. His meticulous records detailed payments, names, and dates. A treasure trove of evidence that could dismantle the entire operation. This wasn't a man who would accidentally drive off a cliff. This was a man with a contingency plan for every possible outcome. So why did his final plan fail so catastrophically? Or did it? The Julian Hayes presented to the public was a carefully constructed fiction, a cover for a man living a life of extreme risk. The question the original investigators never bothered to ask was not how he died, but who would benefit most from his permanent silence. For 15 years, the file on Julian Hayes gathered dust in a records warehouse, its cover stamped "Closed Accidental Death." It was a closed loop, a story with a beginning, a middle, and a tragic, accepted end. But accepted doesn't always mean true. In 2019, a newly formed state cold case unit, tasked with re-examining unsolved and suspiciously closed cases, pulled Box 774 from the shelf. At the helm was Detective Isabella Rossi, a tenacious investigator known for her refusal to accept easy answers. She wasn't looking for accidents. She was hunting for ghosts in the paperwork. The initial pushback was significant. The original investigators, now retired, were adamant. It was an open and shut case. A storm, a dangerous road, a tragic miscalculation. They called the new inquiry a waste of taxpayer money. "We did our job," one of them stated in a preliminary interview, his tone defensive. There was nothing there to suggest anything else. But Rossi saw what they had either missed or willfully ignored. The original case file was thin, almost negligently so. The accident reconstruction report was a single page, based on assumptions rather than data. Witness interviews were cursory, focusing almost exclusively on Julian's emotional state, painting him as a stressed but normal man. No one had dug into his finances beyond a surface-level bank statement check. No one had pulled phone records or questioned his business associates with any real scrutiny. It was as if the investigation was designed to reach the conclusion of accident from the very beginning. Detective Rossi's team started from scratch. They treated Julian Hayes not as a victim of a tragic accident, but as a missing person in an active investigation. They began canvassing old contacts, re-interviewing neighbors, and submitting the sparse original evidence for modern forensic analysis. They discovered that the tow truck driver who pulled the car from the ravine had mentioned something about the brake lines looking funny, a comment noted in his personal log, but absent from the official police report. They found a record of a 911 call from a trucker on the same mountain pass that night, reporting a dark sedan tailgating a vehicle matching Julian's, a lead that was never followed up on. Each new discovery was a small crack in the official story, and soon the cracks began to connect, forming a web of inconsistencies and neglected leads. The cold case unit wasn't just reopening a file. They were challenging a verdict, questioning the competency and perhaps the integrity of the original investigation itself. The ghost in box 774 was starting to talk, and Detective Rossi was listening. The centerpiece of the official story was the wreckage of Julian Hayes' sedan. It was the physical proof of a fatal error, a silent, metal witness to a tragedy. For 15 years, it sat in an impound lot, rusting under a blue tarp, a forgotten relic. Detective Rossi's first major action was to have the vehicle transported to the state's forensic crime lab. What the original investigators had seen as twisted metal, the new team saw as a pristine crime scene, preserved by time and neglect. The examination began with the tires. The 2004 report stated they were bald, a contributing factor to the loss of control. Modern analysis confirmed they were worn, but well within legal limits, not nearly worn enough to be the primary cause of such a catastrophic failure. Then they moved to the car's undercarriage. The tow truck driver's offhand comment about the brake lines became a focal point. Under a high-resolution digital microscope, forensic mechanics found what the naked eye had missed. The rear brake line hadn't ruptured from the impact of the crash. It showed clear, microscopic striations and a telltale flare, marks consistent with a clean cut from a pair of specialized pliers, not a jagged tear from shearing force. Someone had deliberately severed the line. This single discovery transformed the case from accident to homicide. The team then created a full 3D digital reconstruction of the crash, using the car's specifications, the topography of the ravine, and advanced physics simulations. The official report claimed Julian had simply skidded off the road at a sharp turn. The new simulations showed that for the car to have cleared the guardrail and landed where it did, it would have needed to be traveling at a speed far exceeding what was safe or even plausible for that turn in a storm. More importantly, the trajectory suggested an accelerant force. The car didn't just slide off the road, it was propelled. This aligned with the trucker's forgotten 911 call, the report of a dark sedan tailgating Julian's car. The new theory was chilling. Julian's brakes were compromised, and as he approached the turn, a second vehicle hit him from behind. A calculated nudge, sending him over the edge into the darkness. The evidence that had been used to close the case was now the very evidence that proved it was murder. The rainstorm, the dangerous road, the late hour, they weren't the causes of the accident. They were the perfect cover for a meticulously planned execution. With the physical evidence pointing undeniably to murder, Detective Rossi's investigation pivoted. The question was no longer what happened, but who did it. The encrypted laptop from Julian's secret storage unit provided the answer. After months of work, forensic analysts finally broke through the encryption, and on the desktop was a single password-protected folder labeled Insurance. Inside was not a policy, but a dead man's switch. A detailed dossier on Julian's primary business partner, Marcus Thorne. Thorne was the public face of their operation, charismatic and well-connected. During the initial 2004 investigation, he had an airtight alibi. He claimed he was at a high-stakes poker game in a private club 200 miles away, a story corroborated by 5 other men at the table. He expressed shock and devastation at his partner's death. Case closed. But Julian's dossier painted a different picture. It contained copies of emails and recorded phone calls, revealing that Thorne was embezzling vast sums of money from their criminal clients, trying to build his own empire on the side. Julian had discovered the betrayal and was planning to expose him. The insurance file was his leverage. Detective Rossi's team focused on dismantling Thorne's alibi. They pulled cell phone records, a technology in its relative infancy in 2004 and often overlooked. While Thorne's primary phone was indeed pinging towers near the poker game, a second, unregistered burner phone, whose number Julian had meticulously logged in his file, was pinging towers all along the mountain pass on the night of the crash. The signal moved in perfect sync with Julian's known route right up to the ravine. The final ping was recorded just a quarter mile from the crash site, 30 minutes after the estimated time of death. The alibi was a sham. The 5 men who vouched for Thorne were not just poker buddies. They were all on the syndicate's payroll, names that also appeared in Julian's ledger. Thorne had never been at that game. He had sent his phone with a trusted associate and used his burner to coordinate the hit. He had established the perfect alibi, while he, or a hired associate, was in that dark sedan, tailgating his partner toward the edge of the ravine. The alibi that had satisfied investigators for 15 years was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, a firewall of lies. And with the discovery of the burner phone's location data, that firewall came crashing down, exposing the killer who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some stories are not meant to be told. They are meant to be buried. Welcome back to the Obsidian Archive. We return to the file of Elias Vance, the man who walked into the unforgiving wilderness of the Cascade Mountains and was officially declared the victim of a tragic accident. A neat conclusion. A closed case. But in the shadows of this tidy narrative, the truth is rarely so simple. 3 years after Vance's vehicle was found abandoned, and 2 years after the accidental death ruling, the case file was ripped open by a single shocking event. A confession. It came from a man named Elias Croft, a transient who had been drifting through the small towns that dotted the base of the mountains. Picked up on an unrelated charge, Croft, under the pressure of interrogation, began to talk. He didn't just talk. He painted a picture so vivid, so detailed, it seemed to solve everything. He claimed he had argued with Vance over a debt at a remote trailhead. The argument escalated. There was a struggle, a fall. Croft, panicked, said he hid the body, making it look as though Vance had simply wandered off and succumbed to the elements. The details he provided were chillingly accurate. He described a unique dent on the passenger side of Vance's truck, a specific brand of hiking boots Vance wore, details that had not been released to the public. For a brief, electrifying moment, the mystery was solved. The accident was a lie. It was manslaughter. The local sheriff's department held a press conference, hailing a breakthrough. The Vance family, tormented by years of uncertainty, finally had a villain to focus their grief upon. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the solution dissolved into mist. 48 hours later, with a lawyer now present, Silas Croft retracted his entire statement. He claimed he was coerced, fed details by overzealous detectives, desperate to close a high-profile cold case. He was exhausted, intimidated, and confused, he said. He had gleaned details from old newspapers and town gossip, weaving them into a story he thought the police wanted to hear. An examination of the interrogation tapes was inconclusive. The pressure was palpable, the questioning leading. But was it coercion? Or was it a skilled manipulator backing away from the consequences of his own words? With the confession retracted, the prosecution's case evaporated. There was no body, no physical evidence linking Croft to Vance. He was released, and he vanished back into the transient life from which he had emerged. The case file, once again, was stamped accidental death. The confession became a footnote, a bizarre and frustrating chapter that officials were keen to forget. But we do not forget, because the question remains: did a desperate man invent a story to get out of a minor charge, or did a killer confess the truth, only to snatch it back from the brink, leaving the mystery of Elias Vance darker and more impenetrable than ever before? The official narrative gives us two possibilities for Elias Vance: a victim of the wilderness, or the victim of a man who confessed and then recanted. But within the archive, there exists a third file, one that authorities dismissed as fantasy, one that reframes the entire event not as a tragedy, but as a meticulously crafted escape. This is the theory of the staged disappearance. What if Elias Vance was not the victim, but the architect? What if the empty car on the lonely mountain road was not a clue to his death, but the first act of a new life? Investigators who cling to this theory point to a series of anomalies in the months leading up to his vanishing. Vance, a quiet accountant, began behaving erratically. He liquidated a significant portion of his assets, converting them to cash in small, untraceable withdrawals. The amounts were just under the federal reporting threshold, the work of someone who understood financial systems and how to move within them silently. His personal computer's hard drive was professionally wiped just days before he left, a digital scorched earth policy. Friends and family called it stress. Proponents of this theory call it preparation. They argue that the scene itself was too perfect, almost theatrical. His car was left with the keys in the ignition, a half-eaten sandwich on the passenger seat, suggesting a sudden departure. But was it too perfect? An experienced hiker like Vance would never have left his specialized survival pack behind. Yet it sat, fully stocked, in the trunk. It was the backpack of a man who wanted you to think he was going for a hike, not one who actually was. Then there are the whispers, the unconfirmed sightings. A man matching Vance's description, paying cash for a bus ticket in a town 3 states away, a week after he disappeared. Another report of him working as a short-order cook in a coastal town under a different name 6 months later. Each lead was a dead end, dismissed by law enforcement as a case of mistaken identity from a public eager to help. But are they all mistakes? Or are they fleeting glimpses of a ghost? The motive remains the central question. Was he running from something? Mounting debts that no one knew about? A secret life that was about to be exposed? Or was he running to something? A new identity, a clean slate, a life free from the quiet desperation that his old one held? The accident ruling is clean. It requires no further investigation into a man's hidden life. It's an easy answer. But the theory of a staged disappearance suggests a far more complex and intelligent individual than the one portrayed in the official file. A man capable of outsmarting not just his family and friends, but the very system that was trying to find him. He didn't just disappear into the woods. He may have disappeared into plain sight. In any unsolved case, there are 2 mysteries. The first is what happened to the person who vanished. The second, and often more insidious, is the mystery of the investigation itself. In the disappearance of Elias Vance, the actions and inactions of the authorities built a fortress around the case file. A wall of official silence that has stood for years, repelling any attempt to find the truth. Why was the accident ruling declared so quickly? Vance was missing for less than a year, with no body recovered, when the coroner, citing the dangers of the terrain and the abandoned vehicle, officially closed the book. This is unusually fast. Cold case protocols often require years, sometimes decades, before such a final determination is made. It felt less like a conclusion based on evidence and more like an administrative clearing of the decks. This haste becomes more suspicious when you consider the leads they chose not to pursue. The financial anomalies were noted but dismissed as irrelevant. The wiped computer hard drive was deemed inconclusive. The multiple witness sightings in other states were logged but never actively investigated on the ground. Our own attempts to penetrate this wall through Freedom of Information Act requests have been a study in frustration. We requested the full, unredacted case file on Elias Vance. 6 months later, we received a package. Inside were 200 pages. Over 150 of them were almost entirely blacked out with marker. Key witness interviews, forensic reports on the vehicle, the detective's internal memos, all rendered meaningless. The official reason cited was protection of investigative techniques and privacy concerns. But for a closed case ruled an accident, what investigative techniques are there left to protect? Whose privacy is being guarded so ferociously? It feels less like protection and more like concealment. We spoke off the record to a retired deputy who was on the force at the time. He would only say this: there was pressure from upstairs to label it an accident and move on. It was a resource drain, and there were sensitivities involved. What sensitivities? He wouldn't elaborate. This is the wall. It's built of redactions, of quiet dismissals, of convenient conclusions. It's a wall that protects a narrative. The narrative is that a man got lost in the woods. It's simple, it's tragic, and it's closed. But every blacked-out line on those pages, every unanswered question, every no comment from the department, only serves to reinforce the dark possibility that the official story is the one thing it cannot be: the truth. The silence isn't an absence of answers. It is an answer in itself. A case file in a dusty archive is not a dead thing. It is dormant. It waits. It waits for a new technology, a new witness, a new investigator who refuses to accept the final page. The file of Elias Vance, officially closed and stamped accidental death, is one such file. It refuses to lie still. For the authorities, it is a closed loop. For us, here at the Obsidian Archive, and for a dedicated community of online sleuths, it remains a labyrinth with no exit. The passage of time, which buries so many secrets, sometimes unearths them. New forensic techniques could re-examine Vance's abandoned vehicle, searching for trace DNA that was undetectable years ago. Advanced satellite imagery analysis could potentially scour historical data of the vast wilderness, searching for anomalies, for signs of a makeshift camp or a grave that were missed by search parties on the ground. These are no longer the realms of fiction. They are real tools that have solved decades-old cases. But they require one crucial thing: the will to look again. A will that seems to be entirely absent from official channels. But the file is being kept alive elsewhere. In the late-night hours, on encrypted forums and message boards, his case is dissected with a relentless passion. Strangers pore over maps, debate theories, and cross-reference public records. They are the custodians of his memory, the guardians of the questions. 2 years ago, this community unearthed a significant lead. They found evidence that Elias Vance had purchased a high-frequency shortwave radio just a month before he disappeared, a piece of equipment far beyond the needs of a casual hiker. It was never found in his belongings or his car. It opens up a world of possibilities. Was he communicating with someone? Was he planning to go truly off-grid, far from the reach of conventional technology? This discovery, born from civilian curiosity, was submitted to the sheriff's department. Their response? A polite acknowledgement. The file remained closed. This is the enduring legacy of cases like this. They exist in a state of quantum uncertainty. Elias Vance is simultaneously the victim of an accident, the victim of a murder, and the architect of his own new life. All possibilities exist at once because the file was sealed before any could be definitively ruled out. The official story is a dam, holding back a flood of contradictions. But the cracks are beginning to show. A retracted confession, evidence of a planned escape, a wall of silence, and a radio to nowhere. The file may be closed, but the story is not over. The archive is never truly sealed, and the central haunting question echoes through the years. If it was just an accident, why is everyone so afraid to look closer?